just been told that the chair is not going to be attending tonight, so I'm going to be the chair for tonight. And roll call, I'm here.
Hey, Commissioner Agabi, if you could just wait a couple of minutes. We're not yet started in the meeting. We've got about a minute left and then we can start it. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Commissioner Agabi, it is now 5:30 and you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. So, as I was saying before, the chair is not here tonight, so I'm going to be the chair. For roll call, I am here. We start from me and then go to the house. Starting with the lady in a red blazer.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Kelly Fong. I am the Assistant City Manager for the City of Lacey.
Hi, I'm Joe McGugan with Feline Friends.
Vicki Smith, Deschutes Animal Clinic.
Emily Klaus, Thurston County Commissioner.
Malcolm Miller, City of Lacey, Deputy Mayor.
Andrew Toledo, Operations Manager, Joint Animal Services.
Here to Field Supervisor for Joint Animal Services.
And I see Vicky's online. Vicky, could you please go ahead, please?
Vicki Solemn from Thurston County Humane Society.
Thank you very much. Haven't dispersed with that. Can I get
Councilmember Agabi, I believe we also have Commissioner Fournier here as well. And also Executive Director.
That is true. That is true. Sorry, I didn't see his picture. When can you please introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, Peter. Wayne Fournier, Thurston County Commissioner Rep.
Sorry about that, Wayne. Thank you.
And I'm Sarah Hawk, Executive Director for Joint Animal Services.
There you go. It is too hard being a part-time chairman. Thank you. So, can I get an approval for our minutes from our last? I believe our meeting was on, I don't see a date.
I would move to approve the agenda and the consent agenda items.
Don't we always approve our last meeting minutes? Do we not?
Well, they're part of the agenda and consent agenda items. We can approve them separately, though.
Currently,
All right, because the way I understand, we always approve them for the agenda.
Councilmember Agabi, just to clarify, currently we have all of the minutes from October 14th, as well as the shelter statistics from October 24, and then the approval of the agenda under item number 3, the approval of the agenda and consent agenda items as one item. And we have a motion, and we are waiting for a second.
Okay, thank you. So, any second?
Second.
Okay, so that has been approved and dispensed with. So we will go to
Got a vote.
Councilmember Agabi, if we could get a vote for those in favor and those opposed.
okay. So do I get a vote for the consent calendar and approval of minutes for October 14, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. When did you vote aye or no?
I did. I said aye.
Okay, so on that note, I think that's unanimous. So next on the agenda, I see public comments. Do we have public comment for tonight?
Councilmember Guppy, we had no individuals sign up in advance online. We do
Okay.
have one individual who is here and would like to provide a public comment in person.
Okay. So for since I've been here, we haven't done public comment in person. So from what I'm used to, public normally it's about 3 minutes or so. Is that what we're going by if you're doing it in person?
That is what we'd recommend, is to have a standard of 3 minutes.
Okay. So whomever is going to be giving the testimony for the public comment can proceed, please.
So if you could just announce your name and then provide your comments and stick to 3 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Kevin Burton-Crow. I'm a resident of Incorporated Thurston County. I live out towards Yelm. While I do work for the sheriff's office, I'm not here representing them tonight. I'm here on my own time and on my own accord. I just wanted to come and say to each of the commissioners, thank you guys for everything that you're doing with animal services. I've been extremely impressed with, both as a citizen and someone that's been working with them very closely for the last 10 years, that the programs that they have most recently been providing and the services they've been providing have been extremely valuable. I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do without them. I'm sure recently you've seen in the news, there's been a couple of stories of the large cockfighting rings, as well as some other big things. I was primary with the sheriff's office on those, but really relied on animal services, both their enforcement and as well as their shelter teams to really accomplish those. Also, anecdotally, in talking with citizens out where I live, it used to be that we didn't even know animal services was part of something that South County was able to use. And that's changed quite drastically in the last year plus, with the understanding that during COVID and how difficult it was to find staffing for anybody. So I just generally really excited about what they're doing. Look forward to being as supportive as I can with them, and thanking you guys for everything you've done and giving them direction and support that they need. Because I know they can be the unsung heroes, I guess, of a lot of the things. And they're the ones kind of being the subject matter experts for a lot of the stuff that we don't see happening with the cats, dogs, and other animals out in the county. So thank you guys for your time. I'll keep it brief. I appreciate what you're doing, and I support animal services.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other persons for public comment?
We do not, Councilmember.
Okay. So on that note, so the next item on our agenda is a public hearing for our 2025 budget. So do we have anybody that has signed up to testify about the budget
Councilmember Guppy,
or to provide?
if we could get the public hearing opened, and so we want to do so by announcing the time and stating that the public hearing is now open.
I believe I just did when I said next on the agenda is a public comment for the public hearing. I just did that.
It'll be open.
We'll consider it open then at 5:38.
Okay. So do we have any person that has signed up to give testimony about the 2025 John Animal Services budget?
So, Councilmember, at this point, we don't have anybody signed up. We do recommend that we go through the staff presentation first and then allow commissioners to ask questions and then to call for the public testimony and then to close the hearing. So if we could, we'd like to present to JASCOM on the budget.
Okay, so is your presentation about the entirety of the budget, or are you giving a summary of what you provided before to the commission?
It's a summary.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
Give me a moment to share my screen. All right, so this is just a brief overview of what we discussed in our October meeting, which was the more in-depth animal services recommended budget. Just again, to briefly remind everybody, this is our 5-year strategic plan along with our 3 goals. This is the tool that we use to build our budgets yearly based on these strategies and key benchmarks, as well as the overall strategic plan. Budget assumptions, again, cost of living and steps in the salary increase insurance and liability, continuing increased animal intake, increase in field calls, department restructuring. But again, remember, we're not adding any staff. We are allocating the animal care and veterinary care manager that is being allocated into a licensed veterinary technician. So the restructuring is more of just a change of allocation rather than adding of any actual staff. Increase in revenue through donations, expenses based on historical changes, historical base for facilities and fleet maintenance, and continued reserve use. Other assumptions that we use are our strategic priorities, so continuation of the space needs assessment, a governance structure study, at least 95% of medical treatments are performed in-house, and at least 90% of all spay-neuter surgeries are performed in-house as well. We do use restricted medical reserves this year, a total of $250,000 to offset medical staff and other veterinary expenditures. This allows for minimal impact to the jurisdictions in 2025. And remember, after this date, we will reduce our reliance on those medical reserves year over year for the next 5 years. We also did a one-time reserve of $135,000. Again, offset assessments, knowing that the impact to jurisdictions without the field services rebate was going to be impactful for all jurisdictions. So total use of reserves is $385,000. And just briefly to remind the Joint Animal Services Commission, this is a history of our reserve use. With, again, a brief, we've had longstanding history of reliance of reserves prior to 2019 when I got here, but the biggest uses of reserves began in 2021 with COVID and offsetting some of those costs due to the pandemic. Then again, we agreed upon a reduction of the 210 over the next 5 years. So you can see the general is where we've reduced it year over year. And then the addition of the field rebate, as well as not only in 2024, we had a field rebate, but also offset expenditures with $250,000 to cover veterinary care. Just to highlight what that looks like if we had not used reserves, we would be looking at a 1% increase over last year had we not offset those changes. So really, the main thing that we want to highlight here is the majority of the 14% increase to the jurisdictions is that the fact that we are not offering a field rebate this year. That is the majority of what this looks like. And just for people who are visualized differently, so this is an example of what medical reserves, what our expenditures will look like year over year, spending those restricted vet care and unrestricted vet care down, applying those to our veterinary program. Again, I want to highlight that back in 2022, we did project that overarchingly, this is about where the jurisdictions would be had we not had the field rebate and with the continued reduction of our reliance on reserves, we're about where we should be had we not added medical as well as the general use of reserves. This is again our net position. So we have assets, liabilities, and even though it gives everybody the comfort of our net position, you can see our overall net position is over $4 million. I just want to point out that again, the majority of these funds are restricted in some manner. So either they have been restricted by donors, they have been restricted by JASCOM, or they've been restricted by our own policies. For example, operating on a 2 months, equipment, recession, resiliency. Those are all policies that JASCOM has created, as well as then what donors have actually asked for their restrictions to be when they're donating money. So they specifically are asking for certain things to go to vet care, emergency vet care, the cost of animal care, or even our general fund. So this is to give you guys a better idea. 2025 revenue assumptions. So again, we reviewed expense trends and adjusted. Private contributions and donations are estimated to increase based on historical trends, estimating a slight increase in licensing based on historical trends and what we saw last year. We are projecting adoptions to be slightly up. And again, it matches the number of animals coming into the shelter. In correlation, the same number of animals go out. We're also not projecting an increase in reclaims, and that is again towards trends that we are seeing year over year. Other expense assumptions. So inflation has been huge on us, as well as we cut necessary reductions when needed. So it is very much an emphasis on effective shelter operations, standards of care, shelter medicine, efficiencies, and improved customer service. So we also have, this demonstrates some of the uses of our restricted donations that come from our reserves and grants. So we have medical supplies, professional services, veterinary services, public education, and our fee assistance program. Fee assistance program goes towards our reduction in adoption fees, so we can do fee waived events. And then a small portion goes to our licensing assistance program for people who are on a fixed income. Overall budget, we are looking at an overall budget this year of $3,604,949. Jurisdictional assessments make up 59% of those. Next, following shared revenue. Then we're looking at donations and adoptions being some of the other portions of revenue that come in. 2025 budget expenditures. Overall, shelter operations is our largest department when it comes to expenditures. The care of animals is our largest expense, as well as staffing that comes with the care of animals and working with creatures that are have heartbeats. Next up would be field services. So field services makes up about 20 to 24% of our overall budget, depending on the year. And then general services, and just again, for clarification, general services is more like our admin services. That's where a portion of my salary comes from, as well as any large contracts such as our space needs assessment with Animal Arts. In with the following totals. So Thurston County is at 1,081,561. Olympia is at 409,602. Lacey is 437,659, and Tumwater is at 199,293 for a total of $2,126,114 in assessments. So again, just to go over and remind everybody, we are currently looking at a almost 15% increase in the assessments. But when you go through and look at these different boxes and comparisons, If you look at it without the fuel rebate, it really would be a 1% increase across the board. But if we had not used general reserves to offset and to not be at the 250, which we agreed to carry at the 192 we originally wanted, to reduce our reliance on assessments, it really would be closer to a 25% increase. And then again, looking at if we had not used reserves at all to offset assessments, this is what the jurisdictional assessments would have looked like, with closer to a 36% increase. And just to give it from, again, another perspective of how people look at it, the blue column is assessments with the use of reserves, and the red column is assessments paying the true cost of service. So overall, the Joint Animal Services staff and leadership is recommending a total budget to JASCOM of $3,604,949 for the 2025 Joint Animal Services budget. Questions?
Thank you, Sarah.
I have a quick question. Did our insurance costs go up? Everywhere I go, I hear about insurance costs changing, going up, inflating. And I imagine it's probably no different here.
Yes, so our overall benefits for insurance, not necessarily liability per se, but for our overall benefits in personal insurance, they have gone up in cost, as well as when you look out the breakout of our liability costs, when it comes to that type of insurance, it has gone up as well.
Okay, so I have a process question. Because essentially we're looking at a 15% increase in cost. Did we, tonight we're having a budget hearing. Did we make sure that our partners, when I say partners, I mean Olympia, the county, and Tumwater, that they were aware that we were having a budget hearing tonight? And there's an increase of essentially 15%.
Yes, so before we even had our budget presentation in October, everybody, all their partner jurisdictions were emailed with an estimate of what their increases looked like. And then once we had those final total numbers, because the original presentation was closer to like, the estimate in September was like 8 to 10. When we had those changes in October, those updates were presented to all of our partner jurisdictions prior to the October presentation. So they had 2 communications notifying them of that increase.
We keep calling this an increase, right? But this is just the removal of reserves from the, so doesn't that mean it's the removal of a discount?
Like Sarah has highlighted a couple of times through the presentation, and we had provided field rebates over the last 2 years, and this was based on staffing issues as we were trying to get our field service officers up to their full staff levels. And so we proactively went back and provided each of the jurisdictions with a field rebate based on their per capita for those 2 years. And so Sarah just went over the total of them. The last you could see was around $260,000, which was split up, again, per capita for each jurisdiction. And so to the point of the deputy mayor, one of the things that had offset previous assessments was that field rebate. But we now are fully staffed at our FSO officers. I know Sierra can talk about that at length. And so we aren't providing that field service rebate because we do have personnel working in those capacities 24/7 for all of the jurisdictions.
Yeah. That's fair. I remember we were in a meeting and we talked about the reason why the rebate was happening, the reason why we were getting checks back from JASCOM. right? And at that time, I thought it was great because, hey, we're paying, we got money back, right? Right? Anytime you get money back, you feel good. At least I do. Reimbursed for, or whatever the case may be. But if this is truly a discount that's just now has to go away because those dollars are going to be paid to staff now, is that fair to say?
That is absolutely correct. I mean, if you go back to 2023 and 2024, our field service officers level dipped from 4 to 3 to 2, and now we're fully staffed at 5.5, plus a supervisor. As Sarah's talking about the restructuring, half supervisor is going to be overseeing field service officers and then also overseeing veterinary care.
So when it went from 4 to 3 to 2, those extra dollars were just taken back and divided up and handed back to the partners because, hey, we don't have that staff and you shouldn't be paying these dollars, right? So here's your rebate, here's your refund, right? And now we do have the staff and greater capacity. So the discount no longer applies.
That's correct.
All right.
And then
Do we have any more clarifying questions?
The 1% is contractual, right?
1% is of the increase is not contractual. There's no necessarily like a CPI associated with the interlocal agreement. It's based on costs of all of the services that are being provided. What I will note is that takes into account, inflation, that takes into account COLAs, that takes into account, step increases. So, I think we can all recognize that all of those are greater than 1%. And so Sarah and her team have looked through the budget and really taken a look for where are we increasing revenues, which again, Sarah and her team have done a really good job of getting more grants over the last couple of years. And then also taking a look at actual costs and then recognizing what our needs are operationally and making adjustments, with joint animal service operations. And so that 1% increase is an increase, but it is significantly less than all of the above: inflation, COLAs, benefits, steps, et cetera.
Okay, so another discount. Okay. Just wondering.
So I see Wayne has got a high signs up. Wayne?
Thank you, Peter. I just want to make sure I'm following and being respectful of process. And this is a public hearing, and I'm trying to understand, this is the public hearing, so we're looking for comment from the public. So if the county had a comment, it wouldn't necessarily be made during the public hearing or public comment period of the public hearing. Because I mean, I don't want to. There has been some discussion and concern about the proposed increases and the change in the use of donations and reserves and kind of how that affects the county. And we don't have an official position for me to pass on, but I wouldn't want to my lack of saying something during public comment to be taken as the county being on board with anything or necessarily not being on board with anything. So I'm just wanted to make that point.
Good point.
So Wayne, if I understand my civil service rule as a representative of the county, when it comes to public comment, you make comment or submit a comment, but at that point in time, you would not just be part of the board, you would be representing the county as the representative, but not necessarily part of JASCOM as we sit at this very minute.
Okay, I guess I would have go on the record just saying I will reserve comment, but the county may have some comment.
Okay. All right. Vicky, I did see your hand go up a little while ago and you put it back down. Do you still want to talk? No?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I think at this point in time, if I don't see any comment from anybody in the room or online, then we are going to go to public hearing. And if there is anybody, do we have anybody that wants to testify from the public for public hearing?
Councilmember, we have no one signed up online and no one signed up in person to provide public testimony at this public hearing.
Okay, so on that note, I think we will have to close that chapter then and move on to the next item.
Councilmember Gabi, I am
So,
just confirming that you closed it at 5:59.
okay. So I see on the agenda under B, Sarah talking about facility condition report.
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on
Go ahead,
one.
please, Sarah.
Yep. Give me 1 second to share my screen. So as JASCOM should have seen in our meeting packet, we have our emergency pair. So we were so close to making it to the end of the year without any large emergency repairs. However, our smoke detectors that are integrated with our fire system have failed. And so we must replace them ASAP to be compliant with safety and fire regulations. Thankfully, again, we budgeted in 2024 to have some funding available up to $50,000 for capital equipment replacement. And so this $16,000 repair will fall under that. So currently, JASCOM does not need to amend the budget with this repair, but I did want to make everybody aware of it. And again, this is just part of our continuing discussion. Last year, we talked about how we were rated a failing facility in our capital facilities master plan that was done by the city of Lacey. As well as identified that we had over $1 million in critical repairs needed over the next couple of years just to maintain the current level of operations in the facility that we're in. And it will also require significant investment year over year while we are in the process of looking at what a new building looks like. So the longer we are in the current facility, the more expensive it will cost us to maintain operations. So again, in that facilities condition report that was shared with JASCOM last year, you can look at what system structures that our consultant looked at, what immediate repairs looked like, short-term, near-term, medium, and just within the next, 3 to 5 years, we have $1.5 million in repairs and maintenance that need to continue to have ongoing just to continue operations. So just so JASCOM is aware of what some of those systems look like, we are looking at an entire HVAC system replacement. We have to have electrical system upgrades, roofing repairs, and additional kennel replacements such as dog stray and isolation. So these are just items that I want again to make sure on everybody's radar. And ongoing maintenance of this facility, the longer we're in it, we're expected to exceed over $3 million if we are in this building for longer than 5 years. And again, as I stated on the last slide, $1.5 million in repairs and maintenance are anticipated just in the next 3 years to maintain operations. So again, we've done really well this year with not having to have any large scale repairs such as our sewer system last year or our repair of our adoption kennels. And so I just wanted JASCOM to be aware that again, the $16,000 is an emergency repair. We can't be without smoke detectors, which are a larger part of our fire system operations to keep both staff and animals safe in the building. Any questions or concerns?
Add on really quickly to what Sarah was saying is just given the condition of the existing facility, it really underscores the need to have healthy reserves. Because we don't know when issues such as the HVAC going out or the electrical system going out are widespread roof failures. So having reserves and being able to use those funds for those purposes is, number one, kind of what they are intended for, those one-time capital, not necessarily ongoing operations. And so, as we're looking towards the near future, we've obviously are knocking on wood that nothing happens, but should something happen, recognizing that these are funds that can help joint animal services in anytime there's an emergency repair needs necessary.
How long will it take to replenish these reserves?
I guess give me a little bit more on that question.
Well, if we have the reserve of 50 and that's kind of like where we like to have it sit, and then we're going to take 16 out, there's 34. Are we going to need to get back to 50? If so,
Great question.
I was going to say, this is just a budget allocation. So we used $50,000 out of our capital, like out of the overarching capital reserves that we went through on one of the previous budget slides. This was just our budgeted amount of $50,000. That is on average what we set aside out of reserves yearly for emergency repairs. And so it's just thankfully not large enough that we actually have to do an emergency amendment of the budget in order for this repair to happen.
And that's what I was going to add. So in a hypothetical world, let's say that there is a major roof leak and we do need to repair the roof. That could cost, over $200,000. That would be where we'd have to come back to this body with a budget amendment in order to get the funds for that roof repair out of the reserves that we just talked about in the net balance.
does JASCOM have to RFP for that?
You have to follow all of the same processes as the city.
Okay.
So, Malcolm, let me ask a clarifying question. Were you wanting to know how much do we have to decrease in our reserve before we do an amendment? Is that what your question was about?
No, I was more thinking like, where do we get the $16,000 to replace what we're spending and put it back in the reserves?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. On that note, if there is no more comment online or in the room, we move to the next item. Any more comment, please? No? So I see as item
Oh,
number
wait, I did have one
C.
more. Sorry, I had one more.
Okay.
Sorry. So,
All right, go ahead.
as we talk about 1.5 million projected in maintenance repairs for ongoing operation over 3 years and 3 million over 5. I'm wondering where we are with the plan for new facilities and how far we've made it with that.
Are you want to start? Good question.
Sure. No, it's an excellent question. And so we are actively still working with Animal Arts on our space needs assessment to actually determine overarching cost and design for what a new building would look like. And so we will most likely be giving a report to JASCOM early in 2025. Shannon, do you have anything to add to that?
Perfect overview.
Okay. So, any more comment? So on that note, we move to item number C. I see Sarah giving a legislative update.
Yes.
Go ahead, Sarah, please.
Give me one moment. So Shannon and I just wanted to briefly talk about the upcoming 2025 legislative session because there are several bills that I believe JASCOM should be aware. Now keep in mind, these bills don't have numbers yet, as there are some still looking for sponsors and or some have received sponsors, but again, we have not been assigned any numbers at this time. So some legislation of note for everybody to keep an eye on. There is an update to the cruelty and neglect RCWs, and specifically looking in cruelty in the second degree. This also talks about changing some language around cockfighting. So in case anybody was unaware, according to the current RCWs, one who has been convicted of animal fighting is still allowed to own animals. And so one of the updates to this would be to continue with the cruelty in the first degree, which is doesn't allow for people who have been convicted of cruelty in a first degree, and we're hoping in the future animal fighting would not be allowed to own animals in the future. The second legislative item is helping pets and people stay together during climate emergencies. So last year there was a bill that gave funding that helped to co-shelter both people and animals. And so this again is another bill to heighten those resources that would hopefully mandate that at least every shelter that is placed for humans during a climate emergency, there would be an additional shelter for co-housing for people and their pets. The next one to look at is about access to veterinary care. So they are looking at expanding veterinary telehealth and changing the rules about the veterinary client relationship, meaning currently you have to have an in-person VCPR in order to have virtual telehealth. This bill would look at saying that you can establish a vet to client relationship through telehealth. With the idea that only 1 in 3 pets is currently receiving veterinary care, with access to care being one of the major issues. And it's not just about appointments. Some of it, when you're looking at the whole of Washington state, is Eastern Washington has a lot of veterinary deserts where people have to drive upwards of 2 or 3 hours to even access a clinic. And so this is hoping to address some of those issues. We also are looking at a bill having to do with more pet inclusive housing. For those who didn't know, there's a difference between pet friendly housing and pet inclusive housing. So 90% of most leased or rental facilities are pet friendly, meaning they allow some sort of a pet. However, they are not very inclusive when it comes to the allowance of pet. There's usually breed restrictions, weight restrictions, species restrictions, as well as pet deposits, both refundable and non-refundable, and pet rent. And so the pet inclusive housing actually looks at making sure that it's inclusive across the board, that you cannot restrict via species, via weight, that there are caps on pet rent and or pet deposits that people are giving. So this is a huge one for shelters. One of our biggest barriers for both adoption and fosters is the fact that people do not have pet inclusive housing. So when I gave the earlier 90% that are pet friendly, only the average of 7% of Washington state's largest cities, so looking at Olympia, Spokane, Seattle, Tacoma, various cities, less than 10% are actually pet inclusive. So while you can rent and have a pet, there's very few places that you can rent that doesn't discriminate towards the pet that you currently own. So that is what that bill is looking like. They're also,
Sorry.
yep. No, you're okay.
So let's say I have a rental property, right? And you have an Akita, right? Which is like pretty dangerous stuff. So I do, what are my rights? Like, do I get to build in some, because an Akita can jump like a 5.5 foot fence, right? And the people who have them love them, right? But when you see one, you're just like, whoa, right? That is I hope that one's friendly kind of a dog, right? So are there some built-in, like, they have to carry extra insurance, or I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work.
Right. So some of the options that have currently been passed around, and again, like everything's still up for grab. These are just already proposed bills in the legislature. It would really be more about looking at, instead of basing on breed and having that discrimination against a specific breed, it is more about the behavior and care of the animal, right? So if you can prove that your animal has a good history, does not have a bite history, does not have any issues, then that person should be okay, right? And so it's really based more on history of the animal, care of the animal, rather than specific breeds. Because what we're finding is people are having to make the choice between housing or the keeping of their non-human family members. So they are having to give up their non-human family members in order to find housing. And so what we're really doing is causing trauma with families just to make decisions about whether or not they can keep their non-human family member or find housing. And I think it's an unreasonable expectation that especially a lot of the animal welfare world has placed on people when, and Sierra and Andrew they know they've heard this too. A lot of animal welfare advocates or animal welfare people will say, well, I'd rather be homeless than give up my pet. Well, there are a lot of people who are of the houseless community that still keep their pet. But the thing is, right now, in the middle of a housing crisis, choices. And we don't want people to have to make hard choices just to be able to find housing, right? So this one is really looking at making sure that it's equitable across the board, not just for the people leasing the property, but for landlords as well, because we do understand that there are things both ways. But this is looking to make everything just more equitable across the board for everybody and making sure that family members can stay together. And that includes the non-human family members that people recognize as part of their family.
I will also say from a shelter perspective, most of the dogs that we have in the shelter don't qualify to be rented to go to a rental property. And so when you look at kind of changing this to inclusive, it actually allows us to adopt out more animals versus we can right now. Because again, a lot of what we're seeing are those mixed breed pitties and German Shepherds and Akitas and Huskies and all the stuff that nobody wants in rental properties because they have the stigma. And it really is, the owner, not the actual animal. That's what this is kind of getting at is, hey, we want to make sure that we're looking at this from an animal perspective. Like, what is this animal in front of me? Not necessarily what is the breed. Because we automatically discount all these great dogs, and then they have nowhere to go. They have the shelter, which affects us.
Right. We'll probably delineate this and get all granular with it later on. Like, how do you determine the dog's history? He doesn't have like a credit score. If he had a bite history and it's not documented, how would anybody know? Stuff like that. So I know we'll probably be revisiting some of this stuff in the next, who knows how long, after this next session or whatever.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I will keep JASCOM up to date on some of these bills and initiatives that are going through. And I'm also more than happy if there's questions or concerns. There's different lobbyists as well as other organizations that are helping push these bills forward. So a great one for the pet inclusive housing as well as the veterinary telehealth would be, connecting you with the ASPCA. Because they have experts in the field talking about this, and they're some of the main drivers in these legislative initiatives. One of the other ones that we're looking at is the state banning of cat decline. This would be fantastic from an animal welfare point of view. So I am going to get slightly granular. Thankfully, I have no pictures to show you of what it looks like, but just for everybody to understand what cat declawing really means for a cat. So a cat nail is actually your first digit of a human finger at the first joint. So when a cat is actually declawed, the veterinarian is either cutting or laser removing the first digit of every one of their fingers, so to speak. And so it's really not a humane practice, no matter how you look at it. And cats that have been declawed are notorious for having lots of medical and behavioral issues, and it's just not a humane practice. And so this would be looking at a statewide ban. There has already been cities throughout Washington state, including Tacoma, who have actually banned the practice within city limits. And so this would be an overarching look at that. And I believe I'm handing the next slide over to Shannon.
You, Sarah.
Sarah, before we move on, I need to ask a quick question. So about the cockfighting, are the legislature or the proposed bill going to make allowance for if you have a history that shows a pattern of engaging in a cock or animal fighting? When the law goes into effect, does your previous history become part of how you are judged, meaning how you are sentenced?
Question, and I greatly appreciate it. And I have no answer for you, but I can actually, and will more than happily, because I appreciate that question very much. I will take that back to the legislatures and the legislator and the sponsors of the bill to ask that question, and if it would be retroactive or just moving forward. And I can more than happily update you on that once I have an answer.
And if the answer is no, would they consider having a registry of such affiant to go by?
I can ask that question as well, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did want to follow up
Okay,
on one
Shannon,
thing
please.
that kind of relates to the let's talk about the animal, not the breed, right? And then in our last meeting, we had talked about registration with facial ID for animals. And I didn't know if there was any update on that or like how that's going, or like, are people taking us up on that?
Andrew's going to be the best person to actually answer that question.
So we implemented Petco Love Lost not too long ago. And what that allows for you to do, so if you've lost a pet or found a pet, you can actually take a photo of that animal and it will search all the lost and founds that they can. So right now it connects with Nextdoor. They're working on fixing the connection to Facebook, and it connects to one other resource. And so what it does is does that facial recognition and goes out and looks for all those lost or found photos, and then gives you a list of all the animals that are close. And so like if you found a German Shepherd, you take a photo and you're like, it was found in this area. Mm-hmm. You can go, I think it's a minimum of 25 miles, but you can go farther out. And it will show you basically everything that is close to that in that section. And then you can try to either find your dog or find the owner, depending on if you lost yours or if you found.
Would that also work with like a bite history?
No. So this is specifically just for lost and found animals. Bite history is a little bit different because it's going to be dependent on who is, in charge of kind of regulating those bites. So like for us, right? So we get called out and our field team responds to bites, and then we create kind of cases for those, as well as law enforcement will go out as well on bites. But there's no as far as I know, general database that like has all the bites everywhere.
Right.
Now, what does happen if a dog gets deemed potentially dangerous or dangerous, that does follow them in the state of Washington. So if somebody's dog in Thurston County gets deemed dangerous and then they move to Tacoma, we call that area and go, hey, this animal's moving to your location. Here's all their information, because it does follow within the state. Once they leave the state, it doesn't, but within the state it does. And then it's up to that governing jurisdiction to then follow up. But for like you, it's like, let's say you have rental property, as far as I know, unless you are doing like public records requests to be like, does this person have anything? There's not something for you to go into and go like, hey, let me look at this dog to see if it has a bite in the street.
But, yeah. I'm saying, it seems like we're gonna cross that road. Eventually.
Speaking of roads, we're gonna potentially cross eventually. We've talked about the facility and the conditions of the facility, and also how we've been doing the space needs assessment here over the last year. And so one of the things we know we're going to be needing here shortly to move the space needs assessment process forward into design is additional dollars. And so you'll notice as part of this budget that we just reviewed, we don't include design dollars, but that would be the next step. And so one of the things that we've earmarked here as a potential regional shared legislative agenda item is to request from our state legislature $2 million for facility design work. And so we're talking with our regional partners at the city of Lacey. We're also going to be bringing this forward for our council to review and discuss here in next week. But the hope is that potentially if we move forward with this, that we can go to the state and get some dollars for design for a new facility. In addition to the design for the facility, we've also got a policy item that we've been talking with some regional partners as well, and that would be to authorize animal control and shelter districts. I'm sure as many of you are aware, there are a multitude of general purpose government districts across the state. And so what this would be doing is requesting an expansion of that to include for animal services and sheltering. So it could be for the purpose of management, control, improvement, maintenance, and acquisition of animal control and shelter activities. One of the things that we think could benefit this is that number one, this would be a tool for local governments to decide whether or not they would like to pursue or use. So it could be optional. Like many of the districts that are already around Washington State, they just need a majority for them to come into existence. And so with that, it could be an optional tool, something to add to the tool belt for helping finance animal control and shelters. It would help improve and expand animal care, field responses, and could also help create a sustainable funding source for communities here moving forward. So right now we're just having a concept. We don't have any particulars to this design. We're starting again just to talk with our regional partners about what this could look like and if there may be an appetite to pick this up for a policy for our state legislature. So we'll certainly continue to keep Joint Animal Service Commission updated on any of these efforts. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions. I know you've already asked Sarah a bunch of them, but if there's any additional questions.
I feel like if I report on that, I'm gonna get more questions than I can answer. So maybe when we revisit this and it's baked a little longer, I can share it with the entire council. I mean, I'm glad you guys brought it, and I'm just not sure exactly what an animal control district, how that looks.
Sure. And I could give you maybe a little bit more background on kind of the concept and idea.
Yeah.
I think to your point, the particulars aren't fine-tuned, right? So, I think I would say if you take a look at some of the other districts that exist across Washington State. So does anybody have an example of a district?
22nd?
Okay. So legislative districts. Fire control,
Okay.
so that's a
That kind of
perfect
district.
example. Thank you. So, I was gonna go with irrigation, but I think fire control, when we're talking about like public safety is kind of more on par, right? So you have an area that agrees that, hey, we're gonna create a fire authority, right? And it's bound by a geographical element. And all of the individuals within that geographical element get to vote to determine whether or not they want to create this new district, which then has an associated taxing authority with it to gather funds. So if we think of like a fire authority as an example, it would be a property tax that gets designated to that particular fire district. Similarly, this could be something that could have a taxing element to it to gather funding specifically for the types of services that Joint Animal Services provide, But there are a multitude of other types of animal services across the state as well. So I'll use, for example, in Spokane County, right, we've got SCRAPS, which is another type of regional animal control authority. So that could be a tool that could be used in various areas across the state to find a way to get more sustainable funding moving forward.
Okay.
So, Shannon, are you saying that, correct me if I'm wrong, am I hearing that we would like to propose animal district? Is that what I hear?
Yeah, so I think that is what we are kind of bringing to your all's attention today. We're going to be also bringing to the attention of our city council, and we're also going to be talking with our legislative partners. But the idea is that these kind of tools would be optional at the local level for areas to decide whether or not they would want to participate. And they exist for a number of different types of special district services. And so we'd just be adding this element to that list for local entities and areas to decide whether or not they wanted to pursue it. It wouldn't mean that these would be something that would be automatically created. It would be left up to local discretion.
Commissioner Fournier.
Oh,
I'm tracking what you're saying. It's interesting, but I just want to I confirm that there's no current legal framework for this type of special taxing district. What you're saying is you want to pursue legislation to create one. Is that correct?
That is correct. So there is currently nothing that would enable this expressly. And so the idea would be, is there a way to enable the creation?
Okay. And there's lots of library districts, cemetery districts, fire district. Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
okay. All right. So when are we proposing is there going to be like a facility?
Remember, we missed the last element of what you were saying.
Yeah, are we looking at the feasibility study before we do this? I asked because if I recall, the city of Olympia and Tumwater proposed to have a fire district that went down in flames not too long ago. So I don't know. So is there like a feasibility study for us?
Really good point. And I think, even before having a feasibility study, there was a mechanism that existed in order for, Olympia and Tumwater to move forward in that effort. But no mechanism like that exists right now for animal sheltering and animal control. And so that's why we'd say, if local jurisdictions want to pursue it, the first thing that they would need would be a legal mechanism to do it. Whether or not they wanted to pursue it, whether they thought it was feasible in their community, that would have to be your second step.
All right, thank you.
So we're entering into a discussion phase.
Yeah, so next on the agenda, Shannon, are we done with your presentation?
It looks like we have one more question from Commissioner Fournier.
Oh, no, I thought I heard Malcolm say we were going into discussion phase on that subject. I think it's intriguing. So I was like, oh yeah, let's talk about it. But no, sure. I digress.
So because we could do that, we don't have matters arising. We could do that after Sarah's director's report.
No. I meant a jurisdictional discussion phase.
Okay.
Is what this is all hinting at.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
No action, just.
And I will add on, I guess, say that we have been meeting with regional partners as part of the regional shared agenda. And we brought this topic up, for discussion, and we plan on, continuing to bring it up in other venues as well.
Okay. All right. So on that note, I think we will move on to the next item on the agenda. We have a director's report.
Yep. Give me 1 minute to share my screen. All right. First up, I am excited to tell you all that I've actually been elected to the National Animal Care and Control Board, which joins leaders from across the country who set the standard in both municipal sheltering and field services. So I'm very excited, and it's quite an honor, and we are the only representation from the state of Washington. So this is very exciting. Also, what we have going on, oh, I put staff training, but this isn't a staff training. I'm sorry, guys. So we have a new program called Petzl. And Petzl is a free online program and support system that we offer to post-adoption. So an adopter comes to us, they adopt an animal, they can check a box that says they're willing to have their email shared with Petzl. And so Petzl, what's really great is it actually integrates with PetPoint, and it integrates with most veterinary system softwares. And so what happens when pet parents after adoption say, hey, yeah, we would love to be a part of Petzl, it makes a great resource tool for these pet parents. And so all of our shelter and medical records immediately get uploaded and are accessible online for the new pet parent. They can also share all of that information with their new veterinarian in their veterinary clinic. It offers really great support for pet parents when they're trying to get settled with their new adopters. So if they're struggling with things like if they adopted a puppy and they're working on potty training, they can reach out to Petzl for articles and support on how to potty train. When they do this, it also pings us anytime there is a support question. So we, as from a customer service perspective, can reach out to these pet parents and ask them how things are going. Is everything okay? What can we do to help you? And it also does great touch points at different parts of the process. So within a few days of adopting, within a week, within a month, 2 months, 3 months, checking in with these pet parents to make sure that they're settling in with their new pet. And what's really great is this is free. And it's all thanks to the partnerships that Petzl has developed with different community partners and other companies. So like Petco and PetSmart, Hill Science Diet, different veterinary clinics. So all of those are partners that help support that end so that it's free to us and becomes a great resource for pet parents after post-adoption. We also had, yes.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
How many people are on this board that you got elected to?
There's 12 board members total.
Very impressive.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know I'm like not officially represented, but I do have a comment that is a really awesome feat, Sarah. I was like, did we just pass over something that's extremely awesome? And we did. Like, that's a competitive process. And so I do think that you deserve a round of applause.
Thanks, guys.
That's really
I appreciate that. And it was an honor to be elected. So it's elected by membership. So it was other animal welfare professionals as well as animal control officers who were eligible to vote. So it was a vote through my peers and other colleagues, as well as other animal control agencies throughout the country that were the ones voting on this. So thank you guys. I appreciate that. And moving on because, feeling awkward. Thanks. I want to celebrate my team. And so our medical team had a really great month in October, in 2 different ways. So we had a record number of spay neuter surgeries. So we did 175 surgeries in October, which was again a best by about 40 animals. And in October, we have hit 1,000 surgeries for, it should be 2024. I'm sorry about that. So we had two milestones in 2024. One was in June because we actually hit our 1,000th surgery within a year on our exact anniversary date. We had done 1,000 surgeries, which was great. But we've surpassed our ability. So this just goes to show to Dr. Swearingen and her team. So from January to October of this year, we've actually done over 1,000 surgeries just in 2024. So again, this is an amazing testament from where we went to not having any in-house medical care, and we're having to pay for that outside of joint animal services. And that wasn't just paying for those services with 15 different veterinary clinics. It was also the cost and manpower of driving those animals every single day to and from those appointments to make sure that medical spay neuter treatments, any other kind of surgical issues, dentals that were happening, those were all being done outside of joint animal services prior to June of 2023. And so we've already accomplished, when you look at that, that means that we've done closer to about 1,500 surgeries since we were able to bring medical in-house from June of last year. And that is, while we talk about it and you guys are seeing these really big numbers on the screen of saying, oh, it cost us this, we're actually saving the jurisdictions and the shelter from an operational efficiency and from costs. We're saving everybody a bunch of money by bringing this in-house. We would have never have been able to do 1,000 surgeries by October if we were dependent on outside shelters alone, and the cost of that would have been double at least what we are doing now. And so we have more goals for 2025, which is to continue to bring more of those surgeries and more of those medical treatments in-house so that by the end of 2025, closer to 95% rather than 80% are being done in-house. So that just is a testament to the shelter and their ability and this team, and why it's so important to make sure that we're doing best practices when we're doing animal sheltering and doing standards of care. We've also had events. So we had Top Rung Brewery, their Beer, Bones, and Bands adoption event. That was our 3rd annual event. Really exciting. It's a great budding partnership with Top Rung Brewery. We're excited to partner with them every year, and we usually get several dogs adopted at the event as well. We also participated in the Nisqually Housing Fair, and we did simultaneously with offering resources to the community at the housing fair. We also did a kitten adoption. And so that was a lot of fun. And then we also participated in Trunk or Treat with the East Fire District number 6. And then Happy Tales. We are looking at Shandy, so named because she came in and her debut was at the Top Rung event. So she is named after a type of beer. But she was a goofy girl who got adopted. As you can see from her adopters, they're so excited to have her, and she apparently came with a variety of tricks already set. And I also find it interesting, and this is just a side bit, they talk about how she takes treats and she loves treats. At the shelter, very much not a treat motivated dog, by the way. Like, she could have cared less for treats when she was at the shelter. So this is always such a great thing to see because it shows that she feels comfortable in her home. And so she's obviously a great fit. They call her a Velcro dog. So she wants to hang out with them all the time. And so just another successful adoption from Joint Animal Services.
So, Sarah, the amputation, what kind of amputation was it?
Oh, leg amputation. So we have done leg amputations on cats and kittens before, smaller. But we amputated a leg of, this was our first dog amputation. It was a Jack Russell Terrier that was actually involved in a cruelty case that one of Sierra's officers actually pulled under exigent circumstances for cruelty and neglect. And so her injuries were
Gotcha.
such that she had to have an amputation, but then she was happily adopted afterwards.
Yay.
Good. That is good. Do we have any comment or questions?
Thank you for all the work that you put into this. This was a really good presentation.
Of
Thank you.
course.
And about the award, Sarah, my congratulations to you, and thank you for doing JASCOM proud. Thank you.
Oh, it's my honor. I greatly enjoy representing Joint Animal Services and JASCOM. And it's exciting that we are able to continue our discussions and our support for our animal welfare professional staff at a national level and our concerns, right? Like, so the cruelty bill and stuff like that is again another example of how we can share what we have learned and what we're doing nationally. So it's very exciting.
Good. It's a very good recognition. So, on that note, if we don't have any more business to take care of, I will have to adjourn the meeting at 6:45 p.m. And you guys have a good evening.